what does it mean to have Ari Emanuel and Nick Khan under the same umbrella? Is that cause for more optimism when it comes to these WWE rights, leaning on a Nick Khan? And there's also a very interesting question of sort of the distribution of duties as well when you go into some of these larger media rights deals. Like, does Ari take a more front-facing approach in the negotiations? Is this Nick Khan's sort of task moving forward? It's a lot of interesting questions with those two.
There's also like the agency tensions, right? Because Nick Khan comes from CAA, and this is now a WME deal with Endeavor. Look, I don't know. I think we're going to have to see how that works. I think it was notable that on CNBC yesterday, the question was asked, not of Nick Khan, but of Vince McMahon and Ari Emanuel. How are you going to deal with any potential disagreements that come down the road? You know, who's in charge here? You're going to ultimately either Vince McMahon or Ari Emanuel is going to have to be the decision maker. So what's going to happen? And the answer that Emanuel gave was, if we disagree about something, we just won't do it. So first of all, I mean, this whole thing has a WWE slant to it in a sense, because it's all a show, right? I mean, Ari Emanuel's a showman. Vince McMahon's a showman. You had Nick Khan come out and say there's robust interest only to announce a deal over the weekend. Like, he already knew the deal was in place when he was going on all these shows and saying there's robust interest. Like, this is all
this is not a deal that was done in a weekend, right?
Correct. It was, the whole thing has been a work, just like WWE is. So do I believe that Ari Emanuel and Vince McMahon are just not going to do anything if they disagree? Of course I don't. So there's going to have to be some sort of pecking order there. I think that's a really valid, potential thorny thing that comes up here. You've got Dana White, Vince McMahon, and Ari Emanuel now all in leadership roles. Mm-hmm. Are those three people going to be able to coexist in the same company? I mean, I think that's at least that's something we need to, worry about in the abstract question.
Certainly. And, we have seen what the dynamic has been with Ari and Dana White. But with Vince McMahon, like, this is someone that he has not answered to anyone above since 1982. Like, and when you're a 77-year-old, like, very hard to, mentally adapt to that kind of power distribution as well. Like, you look on paper, these are some heavyweights that are all comprised here, but with that comes gigantic egos and a lot of different career paths that have got them there. And is there an adaptability that comes with this kind of a organizational chart?
I mean, on the one hand, this deal makes sense because you've got a structure in place where theoretically you've got Vince McMahon can work. In other words, Endeavor was open to the idea, not only open to it, but if you believe Ari Emanuel, insistent that Vince McMahon come along and play a major part in this new company, where I think that was a major turnoff to a lot of other buyers. On the other hand, now that it exists, we're going to have to see how three men with huge egos who don't shy away from that. I mean, they embrace the fact that these guys are alphas. How are they all going to be able to exist together? Maybe it will be fine. Certainly, maybe they have mutual respect for each other and they'll all figure it out. They are professional businessmen with long track records of success. So it's certainly possible that it all works out. But it's also, there's like fuel there for potentially combustible situation if it doesn't go right.
And something that John and I have talked about a number of times is that, we suspect that if this was any other industry, you think about, the controversy that have happened in CNN, just for a recent example. If this were any other executive in any other industry, I don't know that Vince McMahon would come back from it. But he has, and he's not only come back from it, but he's made a big sale, and he's sitting there on CNBC yesterday to announce this major merger news.
So the key difference there is, I'll give you two key differences. One, the idea that Vince McMahon would have had a history of sexual misconduct is not as surprising as it is with many other media executives. And to some degree, and you saw it with Donald Trump when he ran for president, right? People are sort of more accepting of a situation where they're not as surprised with things as if it came out of left field or you branded yourself as the moral authority. I think that's a factor. But that's abstract. The real factor, which makes this different from, say, a CNN situation, is that Vince McMahon was the majority shareholder of this company. So the idea that he would just go away was nonsensical. He'd have to sell the company. That's the only way he could go away. So Jeff Zucker goes away from CNN because he doesn't own CNN. So that would have to be the apples to apples comparison. It would be a company where the person actually owned it and controlled the voting shares. And something happened to that person. And did they eventually go away? And how did they go away? Sometimes in like an athletic standpoint, like the NFL or the NBA, we have seen forced sales, right? Like Donald Sterling or something like the Clippers. But there is no league over the WWE to force a sale here. There's just shareholders. And the guy that owns the voting rights is the guy that was under the sexual misconduct allegations. So that's the card that Vince McMahon always had here that maybe gave him a leg up over other media executives.
One person raised to me the Formula One owner. I don't remember his name, but that was
Bernie Ecclestone. Yeah.
He was embroiled in some controversy, and maybe that's a comparable case.
Possibly. So you're right. He ended up selling that. Bernie Ecclestone, was in his like late 80s at that point, or like he was at least older than McMahon. So that is one thing to take into account, is sort of the age here. Look, I do think that another thing we need to discuss here is like the succession aspect of this also, right? Like it was never clear to me. In fact, I was told several times by people that I think know that Stephanie McMahon never wanted Vince McMahon to sell the company. So there was always that weird element to this too, which was like, okay, the daughter doesn't want the father to sell the company. And yet he's selling it anyways. But then this ultimate structure, of course, keeps the McMahon family involved. It isn't just selling out. So now Stephanie McMahon is still a part of the picture here, or at least could be down the road. So
if I'm understanding the filings that I read yesterday, is that so the McMahon family members have 10x voting power, and that appears to be going away with the merger.
The voting power, I believe, goes away, but not the economic.
They still have lots of stock. Yeah.
Correct. That's right.